Bienvenue à Les Affaires Brassicoles, votre balado sur l'entrepreneuriat brassicole du Québec, avec Leonardo Calcagno de Baron Mag.
Hi, I am Beth Demmon. I'm a San Diego-based freelance writer and podcast host and author of the book, The Beer Lover's Guide to Cider, American Ciders for Craft Beer Fans to Explore. So thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for your time. I know you're busy. San Diego, I've never been there, so people tell me it's a very nice place up there. How nice is it? Is it very nice or?
It's very nice. It's as nice, if not nicer than people say. So I'm very lucky to be here.
Okay, that's great. So how's the beer scene up there?
Oh, it's bananas. I mean, San Diego is arguably the best, if not one of the best, beer scenes and beer cities in the United States. You know, you could say Portland, Denver, San Diego, and there's certainly some up and coming places, but San Diego has a very long and rich history of craft beer, and a lot of the even really iconic breweries outside of San Diego have roots here. So it's a very influential and expansive beer scene.
Okay, so what is the best brewery that we have to go check out if we go there?
Oh, I will never say the best, but there's definitely some great ones. I was just at AleSmith the other day. I've got some Speedway Stout in the fridge right now. Society Brewing recently opened up their second location in Old Town San Diego, which is pretty close to the airport, which is convenient for people who are visiting or on their way in or out or something like that. I love Fall Brewing. They just opened a new headquarters in Miramar, or some people call it Miramar, because there's quite a few breweries in that area. Pure Project is phenomenal. So, I mean, I could just list on and on, but we've definitely got more than our fair share of amazing ones.
So you're a beer lover, pretty much. You know where you're going.
I'm a beer lover. And there's very few wrong places to go. Like, there's very few places that are just straight up bad. So if you throw a dart at a map of San Diego and just go to your closest brewery, you're probably going to have something good, if not world class.
Excellent. That's great. Well, hopefully someday we'll go there. The reason I'm talking to you is because, as you know, we're doing a special edition in our upcoming magazine where we're talking to a lot of brewers, to a lot of media, B2B media, freelance writers, stuff like that, about what's happening in the industry. The reason we're talking on the industry is because for now, a lot of things have changed. I mean, 8 years ago, I was talking to Brewbound, and he told me, how fast everything is going. Like 10 years ago, everybody was buying breweries. Now people are selling breweries. People are opening tap rooms, and it's very crazy way to just how do you keep it updated for people? Like there's way to do a national articles, and you need to do very vertical. You have to be very local to make sure you're talking to the people. So there's a lot of things going on. So we talked to a freelancers, a couple of magazines. This morning we were talking to a couple of French magazines from France and one from Belgium, and he's telling us pretty much what's happening up there and how hard it is to just keep up with everything. So I know you've been writing for a long time as a freelancer, writer, and a podcast host for sure. Now, can you tell us how's your work? How much has your work changed since the beginning, since now, and how do you keep up updated to make sure that like now you sell shit because it changes every 2 seconds. So somebody the other day called me, gave me a call, like, dude, you told me this a year ago. Like, dude, a year ago, that was a year ago, man.
Nothing. Yeah. I would say being a writer covering the craft beer industry, things have definitely changed over the last 10 years, which is, inevitable. Nothing's going to stay the same. And I think that people started talking about the craft beer bubble a little bit sooner than they maybe needed to, because it was just sort of something to talk about. I think that we have probably gotten a lot closer to that bubble than 2, 3, 5, 6 years ago. And that was always inevitable. That was always going to happen. We were always going to hit peak saturation at some point. And so from the perspective of somebody writing about it, it's difficult because I think the pandemic changed a lot of things. It changed a lot of the way that breweries operate, the way that they communicate, the way that events are run, consumer expectations. And so when I'm covering it, I really do have to think about who I'm talking to. So if I'm writing for San Diego Magazine, that is two things. That's very local. They want to know what's happening in San Diego, and it's not necessarily a beer-centric audience. So I'm going to have to use terminology that a beer expert might find a little bit basic, but the casual beer consumer or just the casual drinker or just a casual average San Diego person is going to be able to understand and easily digest. If I'm talking to or writing something for Good Beer Hunting, I understand that there's an expectation or there's already a level of expertise that I can speak to. I can assume that they know a little bit more because they're reading a beer-centric publication. But I think finding out information, finding out things to write about is a little bit different now. People are kind of retreating into their very specific neighborhoods. And maybe that's specific to San Diego because it is such a geographically widespread beer scene. I mean, we talk about San Diego breweries and they could be 60 miles away from me. So I think that there is a little bit more of a renewed focus in very local. And I also think that it's a little bit harder for journalists to find out information now because, especially like Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it now, it's not as useful as a platform to find out breaking news, to break news, to reach out to people very directly that you otherwise would have had a little bit more difficult time getting their email address or their phone number or something like that. So I think that it's definitely more challenging than it was even a few years ago because there isn't really a social network that connects writers and businesses in the way that they used to. Honestly, we're kind of back to email. Like I get a lot of information from press releases from breweries sending out weekly newsletters and things like that. It keeps them fresh in my mind. It helps me know exactly what's happening, what to look out for, new releases, events, and things like that. So I would say we've definitely gone from more of a social media connectivity to really more individual communication. And I think that puts the onus on breweries a little bit more than it used to be, but that's just sort of the way that it is now from my perception.
Damn, okay. Me personally, I get my Instagram. It's just crazy, with the like personal messages from brewers. Pretty much, that's what's been happening for years. As we cover the our industry here in Quebec, it's like message. I get messages from 5 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock. Emails. People are coming back to emails here. It's true. Like that. It is different. There's one couple of things you say interesting. What kind of bubble is happening in San Diego right now? Is there like a bubble that people are closing down? People are the tap rooms are opening. How do you see it right now?
It's not so much that breweries are closing down, although we had a few, and I think some of that was pandemic related. Some of it was just business as usual. People and businesses come and go. But it's definitely a sharp slowdown in opening, launching new breweries. I mean, even a powerhouse, an icon brewery, the Lost Abbey, I mean, they're pulling back operations. They're to remain afloat, they are minimizing their output and they're focusing on the things that are going to keep the lights on. And I think that that's a really smart, and it's got to be a very humbling step to take. But what's the alternative? You put on a good face until you can't keep the lights on anymore and you close. Like that's ridiculous. So I think that we've seen some strategic self downsizing, and maybe a little bit there might have been some breweries that wanted to expand or have a new location that maybe put the brakes on that. I can think of one would have been a very large project. Amplified Aleworks was going to do something in an area kind of close to me, but where there weren't really any other breweries around. And when the pandemic came, they just couldn't make that happen. And so it's less that places are closing and it's just a slowdown of growth. And there's a lot of reasons why that's happening, but that's what I see happening here in San Diego.
Excellent. So how's your podcast? Is it like more a B2C podcast or more of a B2B podcast, or a mix of it?
So the podcast that I do for Good Beer Hunting is really for most of the time I host the collective podcast, which means that there would be a long form feature,
Mhm.
a written feature for Good Beer Hunting, and I talk to the author of that piece about the piece. So it's certainly, I think tradespeople would be interested in it, but it's really for consumers, for people who are interested in the culture of beer or want to know a little bit more in like the behind the scenes of why and when and how this article was written. So it kind of depends, but I've got one lined up that I think would probably be very interesting to both B2B and B2C listeners, where I'm going to be talking to Rev Nat of Rev Nat's Hard Cider, and we are going to kind of dive into the NA cider that he makes. It's not apple juice. It is fermented with alcohol and then dealcoholized, and he will give us information about what that process is. And so I think that's going to be something a little bit more technical that maybe breweries or cideries or anybody interested in the NA space and process is going to want to listen to. So I think it's a little something for everyone, but it sort of depends on what podcast I'm doing.
So how's the B2B coverage for you? Is it something that's more interesting for than B2C, or something that you are more interested to go afterwards? Because we've seen our growth ourselves on B2B more and more than B2C. People are going to more into like seltzers and crazy wine stuff like that. And their B2Bs, you see more people asking more questions. Are you getting more and more questions from brewers to see if they need to go back? You just, like you said, be humble. Are you looking for people that's what they're doing? What the kind of content they're looking for?
I mean, I think that B2C to me is just inherently easier to execute because you can assume that level of vocabulary that I was talking about before is going to be a little bit more entry level. So I don't necessarily need to double check really technical details or make sure that I get all of my process information correct, because it's speaking to a various level of consumers that don't necessarily need to know about the really technical stuff. I enjoy covering the B2B stuff and do for certain outlets like, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine and something like that. But as a freelancer, I'll sort of just write for whoever pays me. So I'm not too picky about the approach. If it is something like extraordinarily technical, I'm not a home brewer. I've tried it. I don't like it. It's not my thing. I'm not super duper familiar with like the absolute ins and outs of executing a recipe and writing it and things like that. And so there is, I would say, a ceiling to even the knowledge that I can communicate, because it's just not my world. And I don't think that I have the wherewithal to educate people on how to make their beer better outside of like a judging capacity, which I do. But I mean, to me, talking about the culture, the people, the experiences, that's what I enjoy writing about more personally.
I just have to do something. I'm a member. I'm one of the founding members of the Quebec Association of Brewers, amateur brewers in Quebec, and I have no idea how to brew.
Yeah, I mean, homebrew is
I don't want to try it. I don't want to try it.
It's to me, I'm personally very bored homebrewing. Like, it's just not a hobby that I find very interesting. And I've said that if I'm gonna spend 4 hours cleaning on a Saturday, I'd rather be cleaning my house than cleaning like a bucket or a drain or something like that. So that's just me personally. But I love the homebrewers. I love the homebrewing community. I love judging homebrews. I love drinking I love talking about it. I just don't want to do it.
We're in the same thing. I rather go play some soccer or something like that. So that's pretty much my ideas of
Yeah.
One of the things I've saw you, I've been following some of, I've been reading a little bit what you do. Is you cover a lot the women in brewery. I don't know how you say it in English, but like LGBTQ, or like people from now non-white people doing stuff. How do you call that? How do you
like a marginalized community?
marginalize? That's more. Thank you.
Sure.
So how much has it changed since you beginning started writing about it, and how much has and the coverage of what you do right now, and how much is still a lot of work to do before it gets to a percentage that we need to be comfortable about that?
Well, I think visibility has definitely improved over the last couple of years. I mean, people are finally getting put in front of the cameras and getting features and getting written about and getting podcast interviews and things like that, who are not white cis men who are 37 and, like just not the generic stereotypical beer drinker that we saw in the United States in the 80s and 90s. And so I think visibility has improved. I think representation has improved. But I think where the problem, not the problem, but like where we still need the most improvement is straight up money, and people, diversity in the highest levels of brewery ownership, of brewery management, of brewery leadership. We need to see different people holding the purse strings. We need to see it's like, oh, we've got such great diversity in the tap room, and it's like, okay, so great, you've got a very diverse staff of the lowest paid who are members of your organization who are relying on tips, so you're not even really paying them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, the higher you get up in the CEO levels or the ownership levels and things like that, I think that we need to see a lot more women. We need to see a lot more queer representation. We need to see a lot more, Black, Indigenous, people of color in ownership and management levels. And so I think that's where we need to keep pushing. But I think that I like to celebrate the strides that the industry has made, because if you don't celebrate your wins, then what's the point? Then you're just going to be wallowing in your losses and thinking like, we need to do more, we need to do more, and we do need to do more. But let's use the wins that we have to push us forward and give us the energy to keep going, because we see that it's working, we see that it's necessary, we see that it's important. So let's keep it going.
One of the things that I remember talking a couple of years ago, in an interview with a First Nation brewery company here in Quebec, in Ontario. So we're doing this like that, and we always had the trouble of the language. It's like when you write, there's ways to write, because there's a respectful way to write, stuff like that. As a writer, do you see yourself, and a B2B writer, a B2C writer, do you have to, is there a different way to write when you write about marginalized people, about brewers like that? I mean, there's a special language you have to use, because I know a lot of people that don't want to start writing about that because they don't want to offend people or whatever happens, Is there a way to write? Do you have to teach yourself better to make sure that whatever writing you're doing is going to be respectful and better?
It's not that I'm teaching myself. I'm asking people to teach me. And I don't mean like tell me everything instead of doing the research myself. But when I interview somebody, the first things I ask are, okay, please say and spell your name, pronounce it so that I make sure I get it correct. How do you want to be cited? What are your pronouns? Are there any identifiers that you wish for me to use? Do they want me to call them a queer or lesbian? Do you want me to say Black or African American? Because there is no set nomenclature that you can just rely on and know that you're always going to get it right. Some people want to be called Indigenous. Some people prefer Indian. It really just depends. So just ask who you're talking to, how they wish to be identified, and then you don't have to worry about it. And everybody makes assumptions. Everybody makes mistakes. And if you are afraid to ask those questions because you're afraid of making a mistake, then you're never going to improve. And if you do make a mistake, just own it. Just change it. One time I wrote an article about the first and only female brewer in, I think it was Alaska. She came back to me and was like, oh my gosh, after it was published, and was just like, I forgot that there is this other woman who came before me and I'm like, yeah, I didn't find that person. You didn't know either. Let's make the change. Let's give her props for actually being the first, and we'll move on. I don't need to, self-flagellate for the next 10 years because I made an error. You correct it, you learn from it, you move on, and hopefully the damage is never so egregious that that doesn't mean you can use just totally outlandish and outdated terms and think that, oh, it's okay, I'll just fix it later. Like, do your best. Ask those questions at the very beginning, and then the chances of confusion are so much less if you just ask. And nobody's mad about being asked how they want to identify themselves, especially if it's non-white and non-cis and things like that, because people should be at least given the opportunity to be proud of who they are. And if you don't ask those questions, you run the risk of getting it wrong and not celebrating something that, should be celebrated. So that's my advice.
Excellent. Yeah, a lot of people ask me about that question. We try to talk to them and tell them we have our own guide. We send it to people to make sure that everything like that. And one of the questions always to ask how's the newsletter consumption for B2B for you guys? Are you doing a lot of B2 newsletter right now? Is this a business that you guys, you're getting into? Do people ask you for like that? Because I know there's an explosion of like Slack and stuff like that. Are you more and more newsletters to make sure that to get your message through?
Just to make sure I understand the question, are you asking if I am like seeing an increase in requests for B2B work just based on like the evolution of media?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I've seen an increase in my own personal output just because I call myself a full-time freelance writer, but full-time is really the hours that my kid is in school. So when he's not in school, I'm not working, at least in front of my computer. I'm mom, I'm, wife, I'm Beth, I'm friend, I'm doing other things. And so I don't ever want my professional life to outweigh anything in my personal life.
Okay.
And so I think that I could write more B2B stuff, but really I'm just sort of at a level of output that I am comfortable at. I don't necessarily want to work more. I like to work smarter. And if I can work the same amount of hours and still make the same amount or more money, if that means B2B, then great. I'm open to it, but I wouldn't say that people go out of their way to get me to write B2B stuff because that's just not what I would say I'm known for.
Okay.
But I've certainly done it and I'm open to doing it more in the future.
Yeah. You work for Vice, same here. I think everybody will work for Vice one day or another. So that's good.
Yeah, everybody's got a Vice byline. It's,
It comes from our city, Montreal. So pretty much everybody in Montreal that I know, writers, they work for Vice somewhere, someday, somewhere. I used to write for Vice when it was called The Voice. It was called the Montreal People's Montreal Voice, something like that. It was kind of weird, a weird newspaper that was here going on, So where do you see the trends and media right now? Because you work, like I said, you work on B2C, B2B. What kind of trend do you see going on, like in 10 years like that? Because as you said, you've been working 10 years, you see the beer going on, you see the trends from the beginning. Where do you see it in 10 years as a writer?
Wow, 10 years from now as a writer, it's so hard to say because I feel like I don't feel optimistic. If you,
At least you're good. At least you're honest about it, man.
yeah, I mean, if you just look at the state of media, it's in the crapper already. Like, I don't see how much further down we can sink. You look at, local newspapers are closing, print outlets are closing, digital outlets are closing. I don't know which has more job stability, being a staff writer somewhere or being a freelancer, because I don't have a steady paycheck, but nobody's got the promise of a job tomorrow either as a writer. So, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is just to be like, okay, this is a thing that exists and can really never be taken away. And I can build off of this. It's an investment in credibility. It's an investment in experience. And so 10 years down the road, honestly, unless something dramatic changes, I think bigger outlets will be probably paying the same that they're paying today. There will be AI. I can't even begin to guess how that's going to affect the industry, because we're already seeing AI articles being written about things. And that technology is only going to get better. So I don't know. In 10 years, I might be working retail. It's I don't feel great about it, but we'll sure see.
But you have a newsletter called Prohibit Bitching. That's why. So how's it going? Is it something that you want to push more and more, the newsletter?
Prohibition, I would love to do more with Prohibition. The thing that's difficult about that is I'm very committed to keeping it free for readers.
Okay.
And, sponsors kind of come and go, except for one who's been my OG since day one, Rev Nat's Hard Cider out of Portland, Oregon. Big shout out to that guy for supporting independent media. Love you. But, I have to be extremely aware of how I spend my time because, like I said, I don't have unlimited amounts of time. I'm not single. I'm married. I have a kid. I have other things that I want to do to lead a rich, full life, and that doesn't necessarily mean me sitting in front of a computer at 11 p.m. every single day. So, would I love to invest more in prohibition? Yes, but I also have to be really honest with burnout and workload and maximizing output with minimizing effort and just making time for things. And so um one day I would love to introduce a podcast element to the prohibition interviews, and you know we'll see. Subscribe, it's free, read it and share it with your friends, and the more eyes that are on it, maybe the more it will grow, and the more sponsors would be able to support it and be able to allow me to invest more time in that. So we'll see.
But do you see a lot of people going into Substack and newsletter stuff like that? I was talking to David Fonte. He's like, he works a lot and with his Substack, he's doing a lot of work with that. And I'm doing a couple interviews with other people in the Substack, like writing like that. They're not doing they're not doing that crazy amount of money, but they say that's our future pretty much. Like AI is going out, is going to take our business. It's the only way to get analysis and to talk to people directly.
Yeah, and honestly, it is great because nobody can take that away from you. Like, nobody can say, "You're not doing Substack anymore." It would be completely up to me, whether to start or stop it, and you don't have editorial direction, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a way to directly communicate with people who want to hear what you specifically, as an individual, want to say, and I think that there's a real raw beauty to that. I don't mean raw in that it's unpolished. I mean raw in that it's very direct and it can be unfiltered, and it doesn't necessarily need to adhere to a certain brand voice outside of just your personality. And that speaks to really blurring the lines between like person and publication. But yeah, I do see that individual newsletters are certainly not going anywhere. I don't think that they are going to be some great financial salvation for people. I think it'll be similar to what the food blogs were of the early 2000s. No shame on that. I had one, like, I love it. But
What did
yeah,
you talk about in the food blog?
oh, I was just like, I I think I was like 24 and I ate my first Big Mac, and I like took pictures of like me eating a Big Mac and talked about it. And just I love shitty food photography. Like on Instagram, like take a picture of your beige Thanksgiving plate. Like, I love it. I want to see it. And it doesn't have, like, I love a good, well, crisp, polished photo with the great backlighting and blah blah blah, the cocktail stuff. But like, I want to see a picture of the hot dog you're eating at the baseball stadium too. Like, there's room for everything, and I think the same could be said with newsletters. Like, I love to read, the New Yorker, and there's 17,000 words about this like very niche thing. But sometimes I want to read a Substack. Like, one of my favorite ones is Courtney Eisman's Hugging the Bar, and she always pulls a tarot card after talking about whatever beer stuff she's going to talk about. I love that. Like, nobody else is doing that. It's a unique little fingerprint, and it's a view into her world, the person behind the publication. And I think that those types of interactions with the writers that you discover and follow and kind of fall in love with from afar, there's certainly value to that. And so that's part of the reason why I'm on Substack and why newsletters are always going to exist in some form or another.
Excellent. So let's talk about something that you're gonna publish very soon. Is the Beer Lover's Guide to Cider, an American cider for craft beer fans. Before the interview, I was telling you I used to hate cider because it was very sweet. And somebody from Oregon and some people from France came to Quebec, and they're finally showing me that no, it's kind of like a wine you can drink. You can drink it very dry. It can be very something good about it. And good job for the people from Oregon that showed me the way to drink cider. So I'm very happy. I had to go to the States to find out about that. Imagine that. So tell me, can you tell us about the book and why you read a book and
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a beer person. Like, first and foremost, that's but I'm also 38. I'm not 21. And I feel like the drinking habits of 38-year-olds are so much different than the drinking habits of 21, 22, or I think in your, 18, 19-year-olds. And people aren't just wine drinkers anymore. People aren't just beer drinkers anymore. I mean, I think hard seltzer came and just like blew every segment into smithereens. And now it's people are looking for certain flavors. They like pineapple, they like berry, they like really bitter thing, whatever it is. And so they don't care if it's beer, wine, spirits, cocktails, cider, whatever. They just know what they like and they're looking for that particular sensation or an occasion drink. And I think that, I decided to write this book because I started getting into cider around 10 years ago. And then, exponentially since then, when one of my like very best friends became the cider maker at a small, farmhouse cidery in rural Virginia. And he would send me bottles of their farmhouse dry. And I would have never known that cider could be like that if somebody hadn't physically put a bottle in my hand and said, you have to try this. You love saisons. This is basically a saison. It's just made with apples. And I think that that's cider's biggest hurdle, is that it takes people putting cans and bottles into people's hands and saying, you've got to try this. It's going to blow your mind. It's not what you think it's going to be like. And beer, you can stumble upon. You can try a beer at a restaurant because there's 50 to choose from. You probably won't try a cider at a restaurant because there's 2 to choose from if you're lucky. And I wanted with the book to show people that the ciders, at least the ones being made in the United States, are so much more diverse than people think they are. And if they do think about them, they're really thinking about them from a wine perspective, because cider is wine. It's the fermented juice from a fruit. It's just apples instead of grapes. And so process wise, ingredients wise, there really are very few, if any, similarities from cider to beer. But when you look at the way that the beer consumer is evolving, they're drinking other things now as well. Like 10 years ago, I didn't really drink wine. I didn't really drink spirits or cocktails. And now I'm trying a couple different things. And I think that I'm not alone in that. I know that I'm not alone in that. And so I wanted to kind of guide beer drinkers and really anybody just curious about cider towards cider, to show them what's out there, because I think people are going to be very surprised at what's out there. And then that might spark more exploration to find more cider, because it will take somebody putting that bottle in your hand for the first time. And so I hope that maybe it's somebody puts the book in your hand and then you go and find your own bottle. But yeah, it's the Beer Lover's Guide to Cider, and it comes out September 12th. And I think people are going to like it. I think it's pretty good.
What I heard, something interesting you said is, like, I know I was listening to Vinepair a couple of weeks ago, and they told me that beer, I think there's a lot of problems with beer because tap rooms and blah blah and distribution, stuff like that. And one of the things they were telling me is, like, there's a lot of people, they're not drinking beer anymore because there's nothing new in the horizon. There's kind of new stuff. I was telling you here in Montreal and Quebec, there's a guy doing cider with 20 different, like apples from everywhere and putting stuff like that. And there's like a lot of great. We're getting ranch water finally in Quebec, so we're happy about ranch water. And we're getting whole mixes of like espresso, all that stuff like that. And it seems like beer has stopped evolving something interesting. And I think people are going into cider and wine and spirits, stuff like that. You think something like that that's what's also happening?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, there's always innovation in beer. There's always going to be innovation in beer, but I think that people who are interested in trying something new can find that in cider. And it's funny because it's new to so many people, but it's also America's oldest beverage, and there's this real history and tradition and lots of things that have been written about the colonial era and the orchards of yore. But that isn't what American cider still is. Like, we've taken the innovation and the creativity of all of these other segments, and we've kind of picked and chosen the best parts of beer and wine and spirits. And you can find all of those things in cider because it's really still being built. They say that beer is on the third wave. The third wave of beer is in the United States. There was, Prohibition, there was the craft beer and the like homebrew boom of the 80s and 90s, and now we've like kind of jumped the shark. We're in the third wave. I think that cider is kind of in its second wave, in that it's not the colonial era. You could say maybe, I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of making this up on the spot, like maybe, Angry Orchard and some of those types of things that you find on the grocery store shelves, that could be the second coming of American cider tradition. And now we're entering the craft era finally. But if you look at it in comparison to beer, it's a very similar trajectory of where craft beer was in the 80s and 90s. And I think that cider has an opportunity to look at the failures and the successes of other segments to really rise above what people's expectations of what American cider is. And so I think it'll just take a little bit of buy-in from consumers who either don't know about cider and haven't been properly encouraged to try it, or people who've tried it and hate it, like what you were saying. Like, and that's so many people. It's like, oh, I had a bottle, something crappy at a frat party, however many years ago, and I never tried it again because it gave me a headache. Well, guess what? There's like a million more things out there, and I bet that there's something you're gonna like.
What's your preference, bottle or by can?
I'm just a slob, so I love cans. I'm just like, what, one and done. We're good to go. But I mean, there's wonderful bottles where it's, special occasion and you pop it and it's like champagne and it's celebration. And I think that cider can really scratch that like fanciness itch if you've got one, but it can be super chill eating it with a bag of chips and driving your lawnmower or whatever. Like, it can be lots of things.
So punky, man. It's so punky drinking cider like that, man. It's very punk, right?
Yeah. And so I mean, I'm a can lover, but that's just probably the beer person in me also.
But do you see? Do you believe that like the cider industry is gonna learn from what's happening in the beer industry right now, or is gonna be making the same mistakes as before?
I think they'd be foolish not to look at what beer is doing, because beer is shedding consumers. Like, beer is not interesting or cool or innovative, or like, it's mainstream now. And so like the whole craft argument, I mean, sure, it exists, but it's just like, it's sort of the same old story being told for the 10,000th time. So if cider is able to look at what's worked for beer, what's plateaued, what's like really just not worked for them, why wouldn't they? That would be silly to me for them to not look for inspiration elsewhere.
So who's doing something good, something interesting right now, and near you, something that we should check out because of your book, you went around and check it out. Who's doing something innovative in cider?
When I think about innovation in cider, it's all over. I think that a lot of I was having a conversation with someone recently about the approaches that East Coast cider makers make versus West Coast cider makers. And it's really interesting because I think this is a huge generalization, but speaking generally, people on the East Coast have a little bit of a generational tie to orchards. I mean, these are the places where the first, European settlers came, planted orchards. This is where, the legend of Johnny Appleseed started, and George Washington and all that kind of stuff. They've got hundreds of years ahead of the West Coast when it comes to apple trees and farms and growing and things like that. So I think that there's a little bit more of a traditional slant to what's happening on the East Coast. That's not to say there aren't people doing just like wild and crazy things out there with cider making, but I think we see that a little bit more on the West Coast, where it is a little bit more loosey-goosey. It is, it is California, and like, why not try this? Let's add some tropical fruit and see what happens. And so I think there is a little bit of a regional attitude that's different from coast to coast. And that's not even talking about the middle of the country, where there's plenty of great cideries. But I mean, I think about makers like Far West Cider Company, and one of their in the Bay Area of California, and one of their ciders, you guava be kidding me. I mean, it's just guava. Like, it's guava. Like, this is, you got to struggle to find the apple, but it's amazing. And that doesn't make it any less of a cider than, a traditional farmhouse dry that's being made in a colonial era orchard in the foothills of Virginia. It's just a different approach. And so I personally like where we're at in terms of cider is still figuring itself out. And so there are people who are really digging their heels into like a very traditional, rich cider history. And like, that's very cool. But there's also people who are like, let's get as crazy as we can and see what happens. And I think that's cool too. And eventually I think the pendulum swing will find itself somewhere in the middle in terms of just American cider defining itself, but it hasn't defined itself yet. And that's what's cool to see happening.
Yeah, doing something called pear up. It's made with pear. It's made with pear, and it's a distillery. The cider that makes pear.
Oh, like a Perry?
And it's called pear up, like a pear, like the fruit.
Yeah.
And it's a cider also from the United States.
Oh, yeah. So it's interesting because Perry is, if wine is fermented grape juice, cider is fermented apple juice, Perry is fermented pear juice.
Yeah.
So if you see a pear cider, that just means the base is fermented apple juice, but it has pear added to it as well. So I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but Perry is a whole other thing that I think is exciting and wild and a little bit more. It happens a little bit more in Europe. I can only think of like one Perry orchard off the top of my head in the United States, but I mean, I know there's more, but yeah, that's a whole other chapter of
another book, man.
Yeah, I mean, actually, somebody is writing the book of Perry right now, and that's, I mean, talk about niche, but I personally am excited to read it.
Well, excellent. Well, Beth, I just want to say thank you for your time and everything, and hopefully I can see the book soon.
Well, I mean, you can see, yeah, here I got my copies of it the other day, so hopefully, yeah, bookstores everywhere.
How long was it to write?
I had the idea in January 2020, and then by March 2020, there was a bit of a hiccup in the universe, and I, was just kind of focusing on surviving, not necessarily creating. So it took a little bit of a backseat for 8-9 months, and then yeah, and then really towards the end of 2020, I was like, I need to start. If I don't start, what do they say? You can't eat a whale. You eat a whale one bite at a time. I'm like, I'm never going to eat this whale unless I just start taking bites. So yeah, I would say around the end of 2020, I really got serious about writing it. And then, yeah, and I finished it in January of 2023. So I would say, I mean, idea to book being out in the world is 3.5 years, but it was, I would say, pen to paper to turning it in was about 1.5. So
yeah, that's pretty fast, huh?
I'm very good at time management. When you don't have a lot of time to waste, I'm very good at making the most of squeezing every second out of the hour. So
what did you find out about when you started writing a book about cider? What was it, something that you said, like, I didn't know about it, but right now it's like, okay, there's something very good about what's happening in cider right now, besides the crazy things going on and different methods and stuff like that. What did you find that you were very surprised?
I think I had an idea. I was like, oh, American cider is much more diverse than people realize. It was much more diverse than I realized. I mean, the things that some of these people are doing are just absolutely outrageous. I applaud their chutzpah for even trying. But I think I was surprised at even how much further people were taking it than even I expected. And maybe my that's the fun part about writing stuff, is that your conceptions of what you think the story is going to be so often change, and so you do have to be open-minded about your approach to things. But yeah, I think and I think I found more cider makers than I expected also. And I think that shows, people are really investing a lot of time, money, energy, and emotion into building the American craft cider industry. And it's a precious thing. And I think that once people see what's being built, they're going to have a lot of respect for it. And I think that's very cool.
The person I talked to was Christine Walter from Bowman Ciders.
Yeah. She has a great strawberry cider that
she's the one who gave me the bottles when she came to Montreal. We started talking, stuff like that.
Mhm.
And afterwards she went around and she's amazing what she did with a very small acre, and then it grew to 1,000 acres, but she was doing something very small, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, Bauman's is I mean, they're top notch, and they're really setting the standard for a lot of what's happening, on the Pacific Coast as well as across the United States. So definitely one to check out.
So are you doing a tour with the book, or right now you're gonna?
Oh yeah. So we'll have a big kickoff release party here in San Diego, September 15th. So right after the book comes out, I will be at the Great American Beer Festival in Denver. So keep your Thursday night open for STEM ciders. We'll be doing an event there. This is where I put my mom hat on, because my son has a 2-week fall break the first 2 weeks of October. So he's hitting the road with me. I'm dropping him off at grandma's, and I'll hit the East Coast. So I'll be at Church Key in Washington, D.C. on October 4th, I believe. Then I'll be at Potter's Craft Cider October 5th in Charlottesville. I'll be at the Vale Brewing in Richmond, Virginia on Friday, October 6th, because the illustrator for my book does all the branding for the Vale, if you've ever seen that. I'll be in Philly. And then after that, let's see, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. A couple book signings here and there. I'm going to be at Redfield Cider Bar in Oakland in November, Veterans Day weekend, that Thursday. And yeah, I've got plenty of stuff kind of still in the works. But if you go to my website, bethdemmon.com/events, I will be updating it with all of the places that you can find me over the next couple of months.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Beth. And hope to see you, if you're not in the States, but hopefully maybe at a cider event in Canada. We know we have one every year where we invite people from across the world to talk about cider. So hopefully we can see you here.
That would be great. I'm trying to drink some ice cider in Quebec because I haven't been there yet. So that would be great. It's
a great place to be there for that. So thank you very much again. And again, your book is coming soon. When is it coming out in Canada?
Well, there's international pre-order, so you could pre-order it now anytime. But yeah, September 12th is where it's out everywhere.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.